Hello everybody, I wanted to go ahead and get out this second video for you guys this week. This is over how to do slope formula. One of your second assignment for this week is you're having to take a pair of points and then find the slope from them. So we're going to go over again how to use the slope formula and how to plug the numbers into it correctly. That way you guys can finish this one up if you haven't yet. So let's go ahead and take a look at problem number 1 and we'll look at how the slope formula applies to it. So before we get to talking about the points, let's look at the formula itself. So remember that slope means rise over run, and rise refers to the change in the y values. So if you take the higher y value and subtract the lower, you're going to get that value. And then on the bottom, you have the run. Remember, the run is the change in x. So if you take the higher x value and subtract the lower x value, you're going to get the run value. And then you're going to end up with two numbers, sometimes as a whole number, and usually sometimes as a fraction. That would be your answer for slope. Now you're going to see me write m equals my answer for slope because of how the formula is set up. So I'm not going to write the whole word slope equals something. I'm going to write m equals, but m equals slope. They are synonymous. So I'm going to put this right here to make sure everybody's on the same page. So now let's go ahead and start looking at problem number 1. We have two coordinate points. The first thing we have to do is you have to decide which one's going to be point 1 and which one's point 2. I usually always just go for point 1 is going to be the one that's mentioned first. So this is going to be point 1 and negative 4, 5 will be point 2. So now I'm going to take the formula itself and plug in the numbers. I want you guys to go ahead and try to pause the video and try that on your own, and then let's take a look at how that's going to look. Okay, so make sure you have your formula set up the same way as mine. So what we have is we want to start with the y values on top. So I'm going to take y2, which would be 5, the second value from the second point, minus negative 1. So negative 1 is the y value from the first point. So take notice that whenever I plug in the values, I don't have these little 1s and 2s anymore. Those were just placeholders to help us understand where the number comes from. So now let's take a look at the denominator, the numbers on bottom. So we have negative 4, the x value from point 2, minus negative 1, the x value from point 1. So once you are able to get everything set up correctly, then we just have to work out the math to see what our slope is. Typically, I'm going to go ahead and do the subtraction on top and bottom first, and then check to see if my fraction can be simplified in any way. So let's start by the numbers on top. I have 5 minus negative 1. You will encounter this fairly frequently when working with slope formula. You need to always make sure that if you're subtracting a negative number, you recognize that that's adding instead. Be careful with your rules for integers. So I have 5 minus negative 1 is 6. I'll have 6 on top. So now let's take a look at the bottom. I have negative 4 minus negative 1. So remember, here's that subtracting a negative, double negative scenario again. So instead, this is going to be negative 4 plus 1. So whenever I have negative 4 plus 1, that's going to be negative 3. So this is something that I can simplify. I have 6 divided by negative 3, which would also be negative 2, because 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then a positive divided by a negative is always negative. So my slope here, in its most simplified form, is m equals negative 2. I want you to pay very close attention to making sure that you set up the formula correctly and that you plug your numbers into the correct spots. That is most often where people make mistakes. They'll accidentally subtract the numbers from the same point, or they'll do x's on top, y's on bottom, and then it sometimes completely messes everything up. So you have to double check to make sure you've plugged the numbers in correctly. All right, so give me just a moment and I'll get the second problem pulled up for us. So this was problem number 1, and we're going to do problem number 2 next in case you guys didn't see the numbers. Okay, guys, we're back, and now we're going to take a look at problem number 2. Problem number 2 has a point at -5, -2, and a point at 5, 5. So we're going to go ahead and work those out and see what we come up with. Okay, guys, so I've numbered my points and I have set up the formula. So let's take a look at what that's going to be. So I have the point -5, -2 as point 1, and I have 5, 5 as point 2. So when we have our formula, remember the numerator will be y2 minus y1. So that's going to be the y value of point 2 minus the y value of point 1. So we have 5 minus -2. Now let's take a look and see if we set up the denominator correctly. Remember, the denominator is the change in x. So we're going to have x2 minus x1. So I have 5 minus -5, or the x value from the first point. So now we're ready to work this out. So on top in the numerator, we have 5 minus -2. So remember, that's the same thing as 5 plus 2. So I will have 7. And on bottom, we have 5 minus -5. So that's going to give me 10 in the denominator. Just remember, as once again, that's going to be adding instead of subtracting. So we end up with the fraction 7 over 10. Now, that is not a fraction that we can simplify. It's already in simplest form. Because remember, once again, when you're simplifying fractions, you're done if you do not have a factor that you can divide out of both other than 1. So all I have here is that my slope, or m, is equal to 7/10. All right, guys, so that covers my 2 sample problems from your assignment. If you guys have any other questions or anything you need to ask me about, please feel free to let me know. I'm going to be making a trip to the school tomorrow to work on getting some grade stuff hashed out. So tomorrow evening, by time for our Zoom meeting, if any of you guys are needing to ask me questions about grades, I should be able to figure those out for you. So anyways, good. Hopefully I'll hear from some of you guys tomorrow at the Zoom meeting, and you guys have a good rest of your week. All right, bye now.